All right, there are some percentages that you should be able to do without a calculator because the entire system of numbers that we use is based upon the number 10. And so when we are asked to take 10% of something, we should just know that that's basically the same as moving a decimal place, right? So if we have 170 blocks and 10% are green, basically what we're doing is we're taking the decimal place that's right after the 0, 170 point whatever, 000, and we're moving it one spot down to the left, right? So now 10% of 170 is 17. This is a good example of why, even though we have a calculator for the entire test, there are going to be some mental math situations. You shouldn't be picking up your calculator for very basic arithmetic. Even like your basic times tables, for example. You shouldn't have to put 7 times 6 into your calculator. You should just know that that's 42. If you don't know that, then that's going to get you in trouble as you go into high school and have more and more complicated math. The times table is the most important piece of mathematics that you can memorize and be comfortable with. So I definitely recommend, if you're struggling with something like this, that you start to set aside some time to get better at these things. Though I will say that if we had different numbers here, if we had values that were a little bit harder to work with, let's say even just like something like 11%, we would use a formula known as the open formula to deal with that, to kind of get that percentage and then use the calculator correctly. In this case, it's pretty straightforward because we have the main pieces of the open formula, and so we're going to use it in a way that's very intuitive. The O stands for the original amount, the P is the percentage as a decimal, and the N is the new value. So in this case, we know that there are originally 170 blocks in the container. We want 10% of those. So when we turn that into a decimal, again, you got to know this. You got to be able to move a decimal point and convert a percentage into a decimal. That's going to be 0.10. That's 10% as a decimal. And then we're solving for the new piece, the number of green blocks in this case. So again, we should know how to do this mentally, but if we needed to, if the numbers were slightly different, we would just use our calculator and we would do 170 times 0.1 and we would get that 17 is the new value. Now, the reason this formula is so important in future questions that might be harder is that occasionally what they'll do instead is they'll give us the percentage and they'll give us the new value and we'll be forced to find the original value. So instead of doing multiplication, which we associate with percentages, we'll end up doing division, which can kind of confuse people. So if you are bothered by percentages, I should say, if you are kind of uncomfortable with them, then I just recommend using the formula no matter what. So you're always staying organized and you're never going to fall for whatever trap the SAT is trying to set for you. But in this case, you really should just be able to do 10% of 170 in your head, and within just like 3 seconds, you should be able to get 17.